Now, I know a lot of you are jealous because here in California, and if you live in Arizona, Texas, or Florida, you get to grow citrus in your backyard. For the rest of the nation, though, that would be a challenge to the point where maybe you bring it indoors for the winter. Maybe you just have a really nice greenhouse to grow citrus. You can grow citrus indoors. We're talking with Lance Walheim. Lance has written several books about citrus, one from Ironwood Press called Citrus, The Complete Guide to Selecting and Growing More Than 100 Varieties, and a book published by HP called Citrus, How to Select, Grow, and Enjoy. He's also one of the contributing editors to the Sunset Western Garden book that has a very good citrus section as well. And Lance, let's talk about some growing citrus indoors basics. I imagine it would start with choosing the right varieties.
That's very true. And to be honest with you, citrus can be a challenge to grow in cold climates. On the other hand, I have met many people who have been growing things like Meyer lemons and kumquats in back east and very cold climates for 30, 40 years. So people can be successful about it. But you're right. First step, make sure you choose the right variety. And then there's a number of things. You're really going to have a hard time to sweeten up any sweet varieties like a navel orange, although people try it, but in those conditions, it's going to be difficult. So first off, I think you need to try with acid fruit. One of the best ones is the Meyer lemon. It's a very precocious tree that loves to bloom, doesn't need a lot of heat to ripen, and it's a small tree, so it grows perfectly well in a container. All the kumquat hybrids and the kumquats are perfect also. They have smaller fruit that ripens quicker. And again, they have a propensity to rebloom often. Also, limes, bear's lime is a good one. Calamondin, which is a kumquat hybrid. If people want to really take a look at what their possibilities, I really recommend they go to the Four Winds website because Four Winds Growers, which is a citrus grower, and they ship citrus all over the United States, and specifically for indoor growers. So they have a lot of choice there. There's some other oddball stuff that people might want to try.
Fourwindsgrowers.com is that website. And what about the option of letting your citrus trees enjoy the warmer months outdoors and bringing them indoors for the winter? Is that viable?
It certainly is. And the key thing is that you provide a transition zone. The best place to have a citrus indoors, just like you said, is a cool greenhouse where you can provide all the sunlight and high humidity that a tree needs. But think about it. When you're moving a citrus tree from indoors to outside in the spring, or even harsher, from the outside to the indoor conditions, you're really changing things for that tree. The humidity levels outside could be over 50, 60%. You take it inside where the house is heated, you're dropping maybe down to 10% humidity. So those are dramatic changes, and they're going to affect the tree. And the same is true of the light conditions. So what I really recommend, whether you're going inside or outside, is you provide a transition period. And that means you take your trees, if you're taking them outside, and you put them outside in a shady condition after the frost, when the weather warms up a little bit, and give them a shady condition several hours a day, and then move them back. Move them to more light gradually. It may take us several weeks. And also when you go back inside, do it over a slow period. Move your trees under some trees so that they get less light. And then when you do move them inside, make sure that you do anything to give them the right conditions. You certainly don't want them next to a heater vent. You want to do whatever you can to control humidity, which means maybe place them on a tray with some rocks over it where you can add water to the base and increase the humidity around the tree. They're not going to like a lot of heat. Give them as much light as you possibly can. But what's going to happen probably anyway, especially with a Meyer lemon or something like that, you're going to bring them indoors and they're going to drop their leaves. After that, the next thing that might happen is that they're going to bloom. The stress of all that is going to make them bloom. So you're going to get some flowers. They probably won't set fruit indoors, but you will start getting some new growth, making sure that you are doing a good job to maintain the water in the pot, not overwatering, not underwatering. And then they'll start to grow again. And then you'll be faced to move them outside again. And then hopefully in the spring they'll bloom. and you'll be able to ripen that fruit as best as you can until the weather gets cold again. But it's, to get actually usable fruit, it's not easy. It's going to take some hits and misses of where you place the trees, but people do it. People have results, and a lot of people just are happy with the fragrant flowers on the citrus tree. And it's a conversation point. I mean, it's a fun tree to grow, but it's not easy.
And again, probably if you're just starting off in the world of growing citrus indoors, maybe start with something that can take the indoors a little bit better, like the Meyer lemon or the Bear's lime.
Right, or a calamondin or a kumquat. Those are all good choices. And it's the size of the tree, too. Those are small, compact trees. I have seen people try to grow lemons, regular lemons, which are probably the most vigorous citrus, and even grapefruits indoors, and have had pretty good luck, but I doubt they're getting much edible fruit.
And of course, citrus can be maintained at whatever height you want, which I think one great alternative solution, as we talked about, is a greenhouse. But you mentioned a cool greenhouse. What is the temperature range, the ideal temperature range in a greenhouse to grow citrus?
Well, you obviously wouldn't want it to go below freezing, but I think if you could keep it around 40 degrees, 40 to 50 degrees, you'd probably be in pretty good shape. The cooler just increases the humidity, and that's the natural cycle that we go through with citrus trees. They really like that cool winter. That improves the quality of the fruit, and it helps the growth slow down. You get it warm, you get it dry, and you're going to have issues. And you also have to watch out for insect pests, because you want to make sure that you use something like an insecticidal soap or something like that before you bring the trees in, to make sure that you've brought anything that's on them under control, and then keep a close eye on them once you get them inside, because things like mites can develop in the hot, dry weather. So keep an eye on that, and make sure that you control it as soon as you possibly can.
I would think that in order to maintain a good humidity level in a greenhouse situation for citrus, perhaps having a swamp cooler installed could help.
Yeah, that certainly could. And in most cases, greenhouses tend to be on the more humid side. I've seen a lot of people have success in sunrooms where they have, as long as they can keep the temperature down, you can keep that light bright. But you usually will still go through a cycle of some leaf drop when the trees are brought inside. You want to fertilize, but you want to do it lightly, and you definitely do not want to overwater.
That's interesting that if you have citrus indoors, it's okay to fertilize it when it's indoors. I thought maybe you just fertilize it when it's outdoors.
Well, I would continue to fertilize it lightly, maybe at half strength, because it's going to be going through some growth cycles, and you want to make sure that the nutrition is there. I would make sure I used a good citrus fruit or a fertilizer that had the micronutrients in it, zinc, iron, and manganese. But you are hoping that tree is going to grow when it's inside, unless you're totally shutting it down in a cold greenhouse. But I would fertilize lightly.
And what about a soil mix for citrus in containers? I know that citrus they lean to being an acid-loving plant, so I would think that using some sort of rhododendron, camellia, azalea soil mix as part of that soil mix would be a good idea.
That's true. They do prefer to be on the slightly acid side, but they are widely adapted to soil types. I think that most quality potting soils are probably going to be okay. It's more important that we make sure we get those fertilizer nutrients, so those micronutrients in it. But the only thing I'd be worried is maybe if an azalea camellia food would be a little too acid, but you could do a 50-50 mix, and that would be perfect.
All right. And watering is critical to a long life for a plant, and not just keeping the soil media moist. It needs to be a well-drained mixture as well, which means that you have to be very careful to note that there is drainage going on and to do something with that excess water.
That's exactly right. That's another problem. That's a good point. You're bringing in a large plant possibly, or even a larger house plant, and you're going to have trays or something underneath it to catch the excess water that drains out. When you do water, you want to make sure that you water thoroughly so the whole root ball gets wet, but you don't want that water sitting around in the basin. So whatever you can do to drain it out, or put something in there to keep the soil out of the the water constantly. That's the quickest way to kill a citrus tree, is have the bottom of that container soaking wet. You're just not going to get the drainage. They need air for the roots.
I would imagine that citrus will grow faster and probably have more leaves when there's more higher light levels. So is supplemental lighting effective in a situation in a room that maybe only gets sun through a window 5 or 6 hours a day?
Absolutely. Any type of supplemental light that you can use. I know a lot of people that use supplemental lighting and get very good results. So yeah, check around for the type of lights that you can get. And especially if you're going to be growing your citrus trees in an area where you're not getting enough light and they're a little out of the way, you have a lot of options of things that you can set up around the trees. Any more light's going to be a good thing.
All right. And there's all sorts of great light options these days with the newer, less expensive LED fixtures.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about pollination. Most people I know don't let bees fly around their house indoors. So how do you keep a flower happy on a citrus tree if it's indoors?
Yeah, we've learned a lot about citrus pollination over the last few years, and most citrus is self-fruitful. We used to think that that bees were doing the pollination, but in truth, most citrus is wind pollinated if it needs it. The perfect example is how, if you've ever been to California's citrus country, in the spring when the trees are in bloom, they cover the clementine mandarins with netting to keep the bees away. Bees do spread pollen, but it's not often necessary to set fruit. It's more necessary. The downside is if you get pollen from a different variety, you get seedy fruit. That's why the clementines are covered. But most citrus is just self-pollinated or wind-pollinated. A lot of times you can just shake the tree, may help if it's necessary. But if you're having a problem getting fruit set, a lot of people like to try the pollination with just a little hand brush and move the pollen around, see if that affects things. But my guess is that if you're dropping a lot of flowers, it has more to do with the environment the tree's growing with it than a lack of pollination.
Yeah, and I would think, too, that you mentioned wind movement because they are self-pollinating. So people may think, okay, I'll just put a fan next to it and run that for a while. But that would lower the humidity level.
Yeah, and you probably blow the pollen into the next room. So, yeah, I'm not sure that. I just, giving the tree a little shake. I mean, obviously, there's no wind in most houses, and so that should help. And if you really want to play with it, it's kind of fun to go out there with a light brush and move the pollen around just to see what happens. But in most cases, it's not necessary.
Is leaf burn an issue?
Leaf burn can be an issue, especially if you go into we are going into a dramatically drier area. And if you've allowed salts to build up in the tree, you bring it inside, the lack of humidity, can cause leaf burn and eventually leaf drop. I recommend that before you bring the trees inside, do a preventative insect control spray of some kind, whether it's insecticidal soap or neem oil, whatever you're going to do. But also make sure you water the tree really well before you bring it inside. Let it sit out there and drain for a couple days and leach any salts that are in the soil out. That's a good practice with any houseplant that you bring outside and then eventually bring indoors. And watch the weather because it could get a cold spell on there. Don't get caught with your tree outside before it gets too cold. Or if you have a late spring frost, watch out for that. Get them inside if you have to.
I would think, too, a clean citrus tree is a happy citrus tree. So washing off the leaves, both the top side and the bottom side of the leaves before you bring it in the house might be a good idea.
That's a perfect idea. Plus, you could use a foliar fertilizer, but also when you bring it outside in the spring, imagine there's going to be a lot of dust accumulated on the leaves. So when you bring it out, hose it down really good. That's a great idea.
All right. Lance Walheim, citrus grower in Central California and garden author of several great books about citrus. You may have to buy them used. They're out of print, but they're available. One is called Citrus, The Complete Guide to Selecting and Growing More Than 100 Varieties, published by Ironwood Press. And then there's Citrus, How to Select, Grow, and Enjoy, published by HP Books. And, of course, a good citrus explanation and instructions also in the Sunset Western Garden book. And I believe that one is still available, Lance.
It sure is. Better be.
Lance Walheim, garden expert, garden author, citrus grower. Good talking with you.
Thanks, Fred. Good talking to you.